Hello and welcome back to London Cycle Routes. Today I'll be showing you how to cycle from Kennington in South London to Deptford in South East London. This ride takes about half an hour and you can do the whole thing on quiet streets and protected cycle lanes. By public transport, the same journey also takes around half an hour but requires a change from rail to tube. So cycling is a convenient way to make this trip. If you find this video useful or you just enjoy watching it, then please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, as I try to post new videos just like it every week. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to everybody who supports the channel on Patreon. If you'd like to contribute too, then you can find a link in the description below the video. Alright, let's get going. So we're starting by Kennington Tube Station and we're going to turn around and head straight down Braganza Street. This is part of the Walworth low traffic neighbourhood, which was put in by Southwark Council in 2020, and all the streets around here are incredibly quiet and a really nice place to ride a bike. For this ride we are joined by my 2-year-old son, who is on my back, and you might occasionally hear him sing as he really enjoyed this ride. The reason these streets are so quiet is due to bus gates like this one which we're going through here, and other point closures and filters that are dotted around this area which prevent through traffic from using it as a through route. Believe it or not, this video was actually filmed around 9 AM, so pretty much at peak time on a weekday. So yes, this is really about as busy as you can expect it to get. That's what we like on this channel: traffic reduction on streets where it's possible, and on main roads where it isn't, safe and protected infrastructure to separate you from motor traffic, and that's what we're going to be seeing a lot of today. The first stretch of the route is through the Walworth LTN, then there's a stretch through Burgess Park which has traffic-free paths, and then we'll be taking up Cycleway 10, which is a really nicely engineered quiet route which makes use of traffic reduction and protected infrastructure. I'm a big fan of how the street's been closed here on Browning Street. Believe it or not, that actually used to be a regular side road meeting Walworth Road, but it was closed as a trial when the LTN was first put in, and then when the scheme was made permanent a year or two ago, it was converted into that permanent layout you get there, which looks more like a two-way cycle track than a street. I think that kind of design language is really important, as it does show to all road users that this is somewhere for pedestrians and cycles to go, and it stops people trying to drive down it. Either side of the cycle track there were also widened pavements which create a little bit more public space, including for tables at the nearby cafe there. The traffic reduction aspect of the scheme is really important, but I think equally important is thinking about what you can do on streets with lower traffic that you couldn't do when the street layout was designed around prioritising cars. Given so many streets in this city are now lower traffic than they were 5 years ago, I think it's definitely worth everyone having a think about the kind of layouts that they'd like to see where they live. If you've got any ideas in your part of town or somewhere else that you know well, I'd be interested to hear them in the comments, because I think there are loads of them, and people with the local knowledge of their areas will often have the best ideas that other people don't necessarily spot. I talked a bit earlier about how quiet streets can be combined with protected infrastructure at points where it's necessary, and coming up here is a good example of that. The junction with Albany Road is quite a busy one. It goes across quite a busy road, and so we've got this protected filter lane leading us up to the junction, and then we get a choice of whether we want to go left or we take the right lane, because we want to go right, although we're only going right briefly, and we very quickly turn left into Burgess Park. The paths in this park are shared with pedestrians. They're reasonably wide, but do be careful as you ride on them. Don't go too quickly and make sure you give everyone plenty of space. As you can see, there is some lighting in this park and it is 24 hours, but not all the paths that we're using have loads of street lighting. You can go through here at night, and I've done it myself, But obviously do be aware that it can be a bit isolated in parks, so if you're the sort of person who worries about their personal safety, you might want to take that into account when planning a route. Southwark Council has gone some way to providing an alternative route parallel to the park. It put a modal filter on St George's Way, which runs to the south of the park on our right, and you can use that as an alternative to bypass part of the park at night, but it doesn't go the whole way, and it would be great to see alternatives to the park expanded, as ultimately we probably don't want cycle routes permanently going through parks at night. It's not ideal, but in this state where London's cycle infrastructure is developing, I do use them, as often they're the only quiet or safe alternative to going on the main road, and in this case I think that's true. Now, you might have noticed at the beginning of the video when we looked at the map of the route, there was a bit of a dog leg in the middle. That's because the area around Old Kent Road isn't always very permeable for bikes, so we have to go around it to bypass it. It's not awful, and as we saw, cycling is still a great option to take this trip, but in 2025, this year, it should be improved and there should be a new route opening up which cuts off at least some of that detour. That's the Peckham to Rotherhithe Cycleway, and to use that you'd actually go right here down Surrey Canal, walk towards Peckham, but this time we're going to go straight on and then left to turn north instead of south, and we will end up going back on ourselves a bit. But when that new cycleway does open from Rotherhithe to Peckham, and it creates a new crossing over the Old Kent Road at Brewington Park and Ilderton Road, I will be making loads of videos showing it off and how it improves access in this part of South and South East London. It really does make a big difference, even though it's only quite a short route, and there's quite a lot of things that it will enable that you couldn't necessarily do before. I actually went down and had a look at that as of mid-February 2025, and construction was about to start. They're just finishing up the utility works on Ilderton Road, and then TfL will move in and start building its cycle lane there. I'd expect it to be probably done by the end of the summer, so if you are interested in seeing that route and all the other infrastructure opening across London in 2025, do make sure that you hit subscribe on the channel and click the little bell icon so that you're alerted to new videos as I do them. In the meantime, we're taking this little detour via Cycleway 35. There's a short shared pavement section here on Rolls Road, and then a little cycle crossing, or rather an informal crossing that gets you towards Oxley Close, which we join Cycleway 10 on. Now, we're going to be following Cycleway 10 for most of the rest of this route. C10 runs all the way down to Greenwich, but we are only going to be following it to Deptford with a very slight modification. This route used to be my main way of getting to South East London from Central London and the rest of South London, and it's still a really good route. It mostly runs on quiet streets here. As you can see, these are kept quiet with various bollards and filters at the end of the little different streets, kind of creating little cul-de-sacs like this one here underneath the bridge. As a route, it's definitely less important than it was these days, as now Cycleway 4 has opened down the main road, down Lower Road, Jamaica Road and Creek Road, and that's a nice fast direct cycleway route for most of the journeys into South East London. But I still think that for getting to Deptford, Cycleway 10 is actually more direct and still the way to go, and you can see there's still plenty of people on it. This was shot in the summer last year, and Cycleway 4 was definitely open at the point that I filmed this. Some people also prefer C10. It's slightly longer, but actually in some respects it can be quicker, as you don't really have to wait at traffic lights. Because it's on back streets like this, you've mostly got priority over main roads. Certainly in this section, we're just whizzing down. We don't have to stop at side roads. We don't have to stop at junctions. You do get more space than on Cycleway 4. So in some respects, it's maybe a more pleasant ride if you don't like riding alongside busy roads, even where they're separated from motor traffic. There are a couple of things to be aware of about Cycleway 10 though. One is this path that's just coming up here as we pass South Bermondsey Station. It's the Millwall path, so named because it runs past Millwall's stadium, the Den. On match days when Millwall are playing, the path is closed for a couple of hours as it's used for fans to access the stadium. It's actually used to separate away fans from home fans, I think. So when that's the case, you'll need to make alternative arrangements. The detour close to the path isn't great, so you're probably just better off using Cycleway 4 on those days. There's plenty of videos which show Cycleway 4 on here. You can check out the map of all the different routes, which is linked in the description below the video, and just look for all the routes that run slightly to the north of Cycleway 10 on the main road. That's Cycleway 4, and you can see what that's like from those videos. The other thing to be aware of is that there have at various points in the last few years been reports of people getting mugged on this path at night if they're travelling by themselves. So again, I've ridden down here at night, I've never had any problems, and I'm sure most people who have done so have also not had problems, but you should take that into account if you're the sort of person who is worried about that kind of thing as you travel around at night. I know plenty of people are, and people have different thresholds for this kind of thing, so you just need to take it into account when you plan your route. The shared path here alongside Surrey Canal Road is, in my view, perfectly fine. It is shared with pedestrians, but it's also pretty wide and well surfaced, and the footfall on it is generally low, so you don't really have to mix with too many people walking, which is good news for both people on bikes and walking. The big thing to watch out for though is the side roads like the one we just went over here. You don't have priority as you cycle over those side roads. Those markings on the street don't actually mean anything. They are just there to indicate to drivers to expect bikes crossing the side roads there. So as you approach those side roads, just make sure that you do so cautiously and make sure that there isn't any traffic turning or coming out of the side roads. That also goes for driveways and exits to the yards like this one on the left here, and be aware that there can be heavy goods vehicles coming out of those yards, so you definitely don't want to be ending up in front of one of those, so definitely be careful as you do that. The paths in Folkestone Gardens, which is also open for 24 hours as well by the way, are pretty good, but again remember that this section of the route is shared with pedestrians, so you don't want to be riding too quickly. The signage here for Cycleway 10 is basically okay. It was repainted recently. You just follow where it says C10 on the ground, and also those green and blue signs that you'll occasionally see on lampposts. I've actually recently noticed one change around Folkestone Gardens which could be relevant for this route. That is that Rolt Street, which is the street directly to the south of Folkestone Gardens, has actually been closed off to traffic entirely. It's now a pedestrian and cycle area. Lewisham Council did that without very much fanfare, but it could be a slightly better route, and if you took it you would emerge from this side road on the right here. That's Rolt Street, so you would just go straight to the south of Folkestone Gardens and take that. To be honest, it would save you at most like 15 seconds, but it's very slightly more direct because the way that we went to Childers Street does bear north slightly. It's slightly more useful for other routes that maybe take a slightly different route, especially towards New Cross, but for this one it doesn't make a huge difference. But it's definitely interesting to see that Lewisham, a council which hasn't always been great when it comes to cycling and healthy streets stuff, is actually quietly doing a few decent things, especially around this part of town. They also installed a new modal filter on Cold Blow Lane recently, which will actually make a really useful link when it's accompanied by that new Peckham to Rotherhithe cycleway that I was talking about, and I definitely look forward to using that as a route on this channel. So again, make sure you're subscribed if you'd like to see that once that route opens. There's another example here on Edward Street of good use of protected cycle infrastructure which combines with the quiet way that we were using. The quiet way puts you onto the protected lane there, and it takes us down Edward Street, which is a little bit on the busier side, and bridges that gap between the different quiet spots that we were on. We're still following Cycleway 10 here, and it weaves its way through a housing estate where there's very little traffic, and then it drops us very quickly onto Deptford High Street, which is right here. You can keep following Cycleway 10 to Greenwich, but today we're just going to end right here. And yeah, doesn't it look lovely? That route was very easy, and I can assure you that my son really enjoyed it. I did actually turn the volume down a little bit as he was nattering away, and you might not have been able to hear me when I was talking over him. So yeah, it is there. But yeah, I can tell you very much that we enjoyed that route, and I think it's a great one for anyone to ride. You can see on the map here, there is still that dogleg, but we will be able to cut a little bit of that off, I think, by going to the south rather than the north once Peckham to Rotherhithe opens. And there might be a way of bypassing the top of the dogleg as well. I'm going to do a little bit more exploring and find out for you. But in the meantime, please do like that video if you enjoyed it. It helps other people find it. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. And thank you once again to everyone who supports the channel on Patreon. I really appreciate it, and it really helps keep the channel going. Let me know in the comments what you think of that. I'm particularly interested if anyone has any ideas of public space changes that they'd like to see around them on traffic reduced streets. And yeah, just let me know what you think of the route as well, and if you've got better ideas on how to do it. I'll see you in the comments, and for those of you who don't comment, I will see you again next time. Goodbye.